Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Dom Papa. He's the Vice President from the Smart Cities Initiative Arizona Commerce Authority. Welcome, Dom, and thank you very, very much for being here. I know that you. Sorry, Dom, there seems to be a little bit of issues on our side. But I know that you are up and it's 4 o'clock in the morning your side. So we do thank you for being here so much. And it's over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And as long as I have my coffee, I'm ready to go. Excited to be here today and speak to everyone about regionalism and how we are building a new model here in Arizona to bring cities together to build a smart region and deliver services in a new way that we think is very innovative and actually can help become a model for other cities, other regions, and even other countries around the world. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about a regional approach to digital equity. A little bit about me, just for a little bit of background, because you'll see kind of how my background and where I've been has kind of bled into what you'll see today in the presentation. So, as she mentioned, I am the vice president for the Smart State Initiative at the Arizona Commerce Authority. That is Arizona's economic development organization. So, we run the policy, the programs, and the economic development initiatives for Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona. However, prior to that, I actually worked for a technology startup company before moving over to the university at Arizona State University. I then joined the city of Phoenix, where I was a technology policy advisor for the city of Phoenix, helping it transform into becoming a smart city. I then started my own smart city nonprofit before then moving over to the Arizona Commerce Authority. But it's really that tech startup background that I think you'll see come into play here in this presentation and kind of the themes that we're trying to integrate into local government from that tech startup. So a couple of quotes that I just love to share with everyone because I think it really helps shape your thinking as we try to think about innovating government services, especially around digital equity. This one really stands out to me because we all know that the smart cities. It's not about the technology. The technology is actually the easy part, right? It's the people, it's the process that you really need to focus on in order to succeed in truly becoming or evolving or transforming into a smart city. Um, and so what we've realized during the COVID pandemic that the digital divide is not only real, it's pressing and it's a challenge that needs to be solved. And so we've really shaped what we're calling connect the unconnected as one of the most insurmountable challenges that we face of our time. And so we've realized that in order to solve this challenge, it's really going to take an unprecedented level of collaboration. It's going to take public, private sectors coming together to solve this challenge. And what we've done here, we've really narrowed the connecting the unconnected challenge down to three main parts: the availability gap, which is strictly in our mind around the physical infrastructure, either broadband, wireless, radios, the physical infrastructure needed to deploy the network. And then the follow-on challenge is actually the digital equity challenge in our mind. It's the adoption and utilization gap. Once the internet connectivity is there, do people have the devices? Do people have the skills? And do people have the support necessary to actually succeed in the remote classroom or the new digital economy? And so this presentation is really going to focus on the adoption gap and the utilization gap and how we are trying to solve that challenge. Now, let me just paint you a picture of the region in Greater Phoenix that we are now trying to build this new model in. So it's actually the fourth largest county in the United States. It's the fastest growing county for the last 4 years. It's got the city of Phoenix, which is the fifth largest city in the country. It's got Arizona State University, which is the largest public research institution in the country. It's actually got the largest community college district system in the country. It's got 22 cities and towns all slammed up right next to each other in this one county. And so you can start to understand a little bit about the scale that we're working with when you're thinking about innovating for 22 cities, 22 towns coming together to solve this digital equity crisis that we're facing. So I just wanted to let you understand kind of how many cities we're talking about when we're talking about this smart region initiative. And so what we've been trying to do is bring those cities together to create a sustainable, equitable, and scalable model to drive continuous and permanent innovation in digital equity, right? We are really trying to solve the digital divide here in Greater Phoenix. And so, two key strategies that we're really trying to implement. And then here's where you're going to hear a lot about the tech startup background of mine. But two key strategies for systems innovation and digital equity. We're really trying to disrupt government in order to drive innovation in digital equity. So the first thing we're doing is we're leveraging the platform business model as an organizational model for the service delivery. So think Uber, think Airbnb. And then the second kind of key strategy is embracing the network paradigm. And that, again, I'm not the technical guy, more of the governance guy, but the network paradigm being with each node of a network that you add, that network becomes exponentially stronger. So how can we add nodes to this network paradigm, become stronger together, and deliver a better, higher quality service to really scale impact for all people? And here I'll talk a little bit about the Amazon model and that network paradigm. So what we realized as we were studying this digital equity problem is for cities, it's very challenging to start to establish their own digital equity program because when they go alone, when they try to do this themselves, it's very expensive, it's slow, and it's really unsustainable. Think about trying to establish your own digital equity program if you're a city. You've got to hire a digital equity director, you've got to build a digital equity plan, you've got to establish digital navigators. These are the support people that help provide advice and support services to your community. You've got to hire those navigators. You got to train those navigators, and then you got to hire. You got to purchase hotspots. You got to purchase data plans. It just gets unsustainable. Think about all those costs, all that process for a city to stand this up. It's slow, it's expensive, and it's unsustainable. And then most cities don't even think about the operations and maintenance year over year over year. And so it's very daunting for a city to try to really build a digital equity department or drive a digital equity program themselves. And then furthermore, the service model actually gets very, very more confusing because what we realize is that, for instance, in Arizona, one household is actually served by multiple levels of government. I'm sure it's the same way in South Africa. So, we have one household. That household could be served by the city, right? By our county, which is our regional government, by the state, by federal agencies looking to provide digital equity services to communities, the community college district, as I mentioned, the school district, the K-12 system, which is the younger educational system, not other nonprofits trying to provide services, religious organizations, corporates, departments of economic security, my own organization providing services. There's a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations trying to provide very similar services without any coordination across those organizations. And so we realized that the service model, at least here, was very inefficient. It was very expensive. And it was really unsustainable because this, as you're seeing on the screen, is the traditional service model when we think about city services, right? The city of Phoenix delivering a service to a city of Phoenix household. But what we've come to realize is this is not true. Because, for example, an employee for the city of Phoenix could actually live in Surprise. And so the city of Phoenix actually cares about delivering service to that employee. So that way that employee could work remotely from home. So the city is actually servicing households in other cities. And so we started to realize that the service delivery model actually looks something like this. And if you're not scratching your head wondering how in the heck that works, I'm with you, right? It's very challenging. And so we started to think to each other, there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a more efficient, more effective way that we could all come together, collaborate, and actually deliver a better model for digital equity and digital inclusion. And so what we're trying to do is disrupt that old model and build a new one. And I'm going to walk you through that new one right now, what we're trying to do. So again, we're trying to leverage this platform as an organizational model, right? And so what we've done is establish a digital equity institute It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that will provide these services for the region because as this platform model, scale is achieved because we're making these repeatable processes more efficient and more effective because we're delivering a similar service for city A that we're delivering for city C. And so we realize that we can actually scale these services out across multiple cities. Because what we're really trying to do through the model is if we can aggregate the demand, which is aggregate the households onto one side of the equation, right? That top part, then we can actually aggregate funding and we can aggregate the supply of services on the other side in order to deliver this platform as an organizational model. And so this is a little bit about how we're establishing the organizational structure to provide digital equity services for the greater Phoenix region. Because what we understood is that now all of a sudden, the service delivery model, no matter if you're a new city coming onto this model or a new county, the model is actually very scalable because no matter how many cities join, we can still provide those similar services to those households throughout the region. And so, as you can hopefully see, the model becomes much more clear and much more efficient and effective in the way it delivers services because, again, we're aggregating all of the supply on one side, aggregating all the demand on the other in order to deliver a better service. And so, what we're calling this is digital equity innovation as a service, helping cities provide this service in a cheaper, more efficient, and more effective way. So, that's the structure of the organization. And I'll dive a little bit deeper into it in a little bit. But the second key aspect for the systems innovation, again, is this idea of embracing the network paradigm. So, as I mentioned, that thought there was with each node in the network gets exponentially stronger. So the current model, and this is Greater Phoenix, for those of you that might not be aware, these are the cities that you see here with the dots, and there's more of them. I just didn't list them. But right now, the current model is they're all doing their own thing by themselves, going alone. Again, very inefficient, very expensive, and very slow. However, the thought here is if we can create that network and start to connect those nodes, then us as a region, we become very strong because we start to work together and we start to create that network effect in order to provide these digital equity services. And so the cities actually coming together make the region as a whole a lot stronger. And so that's the thought of, hey, we're stronger together than we are apart. So that's the idea of embracing this ecosystem and building the network paradigm. And that was just the cities. Think about all the other organizations that I mentioned, like religious groups and other nonprofits. All when we start to connect all of those nodes into this ecosystem network, we're going to become really strong as a region, and that hopefully will uplift our entire region and help us drive economic development. The second aspect of this network paradigm discussion that I want to have with you all is this idea of the Amazon effect, right? Which basically states that as a consumer, I can buy off Amazon. However, I can also produce off Amazon as well. I can also become a seller. And so we've really thought about this model as we're thinking about connecting these unconnected neighborhoods and delivering digital literacy services for these communities on how can we provide them with an economic pathway out of digital inequity and get them in a place where they can actually start to earn income and earn revenue from this model. And so what we're actually doing right now in Phoenix, Arizona is we're connecting a refugee community here and we're providing that community with digital equity, literacy, workforce development training. And the thought here is that as we start to connect that, let's say that refugee and he's receiving these services, he can actually start to build his own services, build his own programming, come onto the supply side because they're going to understand how to provide these services in a better, more efficient, more effective for their own communities because they are from those communities. So our thought here is that they can start to develop their own programming that they can productize, come on the supply side of the equation, and actually start to deliver those services to communities, other communities throughout the region. So they can actually start to sell their own products, sell their own services, and help their own communities out because we all understand that, these communities understand themselves the best. And so we want to ensure that they have an opportunity to provide services and earn an income through this model. And so we're really excited about that as an economic development pathway out for a lot of these low income, underserved communities. We're trying to provide them with an opportunity in a pathway to success. And so I just wanted to take a few more minutes to really, again, as a government official, to really dive into the model and help you understand how this is helping a city and how this is sustainable, how this is equitable, how this is scalable, and how it will be continuous and permanent moving forward. And so the first key aspect here is the sustainability um, of the program. As I mentioned, the goal here is to bring cities together because, as we know from economics, when you bring cities together, you leverage economies of scale, right? And so cost per city will actually go down. So if you see on the left side of the screen, with one city, the cost to deliver these services, like buying a device or providing a call center support system for your city, the cost per unit is actually very high. However, when cities come together, right, when two cities are trying to buy laptops together, well, they leverage that economies of scale. The price per laptop actually starts to drop, right? The price per service starts to drop. It starts to become cheaper and much more affordable for these cities to deliver these services. So, our thought here is, could we get 22 cities to come together to deliver these services together, thereby dropping the cost per city, making it affordable, and making these services available or affordable for these cities to deliver? And so the thought here was, again, aggregating those cities onto one side of the equation to deliver these services to make it much more cheaper for these cities. That's just the cities. Start to think about now if we start to add in the corporate funding on the side of the equation or the foundational funding on the side of the equation, the price per city actually drops even more, right? Making it much more affordable for these cities to deliver these services on an ongoing basis, year over year over year over year. So again, trying to figure out a way to make this sustainable for cities when we know cities are struggling with budget yearly. And so we really think that this financially is a sustainable model to deliver digital equity services for a region and for multiple cities. We actually found that this model is actually very equitable as well because it enables both very large cities but also very small cities to participate in the digital equity service delivery model. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned earlier, standing up your own department for digital equity is very expensive. You saw all the potential costs that are associated with that. Well, the city of Phoenix, fifth largest city in the country, it's got about a $2 billion budget, could probably do it themselves, right? Let's be honest, they could probably do it themselves. But what about the city of Apache Junction, which is about 7,000 people, or the city of Wickenburg, which I think is even smaller, maybe 2,000 people? For those small cities, it's very, very hard to deliver these services, right? It's too expensive. And so, what ends up happening, especially in those more rural, remote cities, is those households just don't get these services. And it's usually those households in the rural, remote part of the region that need it the most. And so, by building this model, bringing the cities together, it actually is equitable because both large cities and small cities can actually afford it, can actually start to deliver these services. And that way, we're making sure we're actually hitting the communities that probably need it the most. So, we understand that digital equity is not a zero sum game. We're stronger together. Collaboration is our biggest competitive advantage. And again, the thought here is a rising tide lifts all ships. So, this model actually helps both large and small communities alike. And then this idea of continuous innovation, we found this really fascinating as we were working through this because right now in the current model, with the city delivering just a service to its own households and not really collaborating with other cities, if a city innovates in the delivery of a service, they're not really good at telling other cities about what they found out in that innovation. And so other cities continue to perform the service in the old kind of uninnovative way because cities just aren't used to really sharing information or talking a lot together. And so we found there's a lot of inefficiencies and innovation losing out in the old model because it's just not realized from city to city. However, in the new model, with the regional concept and a regional service delivery model, if we realize an innovation by delivering a service to household A, we can immediately scale that innovation out across the entire network. So that way, all households benefit and all cities benefit as well. So innovation is actually flourishing through this new model, because every city is connected in the platform of an organizational model. So we're actually helping cities innovate continuously through this new model. This is probably my most tech forward slide. It's one box, but we're ensuring that this digital equity is permanent because we believe, at least me in the bottom of my heart, that this should not digital equity is so important. It should not be at risk with a new mayor comes in or a new city manager comes in and they have a different mindset, they have a different desire, they have different policies. Digital equity is so important, connecting people, giving them access to the internet and access to the skills needed to succeed in a remote classroom in the new digital economy. It's so important that we this needs to survive administration turnover, political turnover. And so what we're doing is, again, as I mentioned, we're establishing it as a 501c3, um, a nonprofit independent organization. So that way, no matter what happens within the local governments, this organization can focus on delivering these services permanently for the communities. It's again scalable. I think we've kind of touched on the scalability aspects of this model throughout this entire presentation, but I just want to drive this one home again because this is where I think it becomes very, very exciting. Because we're bringing cities together, because we're aggregating the supply side, the funding side of the equation, financial and operational economies of scale ensure that these services and programs can be scaled across multiple jurisdictions because again it's a similar service that we're repeating no matter what city we're delivering their service for. And so what I mean here is um, for an example, digital navigators, for those that might not be aware of that term, it's basically a call center support system. So that way, you provide an unconnected child a laptop and you say good luck. How do I turn it on? How do I access my classroom? I don't know. That poor child doesn't really understand. They've never even had a laptop before. How are they supposed to now participate in a classroom? Well, a digital navigator is someone they could call and provide, and that navigator could provide help for that student or for that family. And so it's basically a call center system. Again, think about the cost to stand up a call center support system for one city. So what we realize is that, call center support system, it doesn't really matter where you are in the region. All that matters is that someone answers the phone and provides the support, right? If you're in Apache Junction and you're a child and you call this number, you just want someone to answer and give you some help. And so what we realize is that this system could actually be deployed, scaled regionally, because if we aggregate funding, build the infrastructure necessary for this call center, we can actually then provide that service to all cities, all households in the entire region, no matter where you are. So the model is actually very, very scalable. The services are very, very scalable because it doesn't really need to be physically located within one community. These systems, these services can actually deployed elsewhere. And so we actually are really starting to think now, this is the greater Phoenix region. What's really stopping us from helping communities outside of this region with this, right? We've got a lot of tribal communities in Arizona. Why can't this digital navigator program actually provide support services for Navajo Nation? Or how about rural St. George, which is actually in Utah? Why couldn't this program actually start to help uplift other cities, not only in Arizona, but actually maybe in other parts of the country as well? And so we really see that this model of cities coming together to provide a service together is actually very scalable. And so we're consciously thinking about the scalability of the framework, building the service, and scaling it to continuously innovate. So we're really excited about it. And maybe the last key challenge that we're trying to serve here, and this one is always interesting for cities because we're always looking to for money to run these programs, is how can we ensure that this digital equity is really what I'm calling investment grade, because it's so important. The current model that you see on the left for these communities really incentivizes cities to really compete against each other, right? And so there's limited amount of funding out there. Let's be honest with each other, right? Corporates, foundations, federal grants, our federal government, our national governments, there's only a limited amount of funding. And so what happens is it's usually grant based, right? Cities have to apply for these grants and hopefully they win and they can bring that money into their community. Well, what that does is it incentivizes cities to compete against each other for that limited amount of funding, right? Even a city A and city B, they might be right next to each other. They might even be kind of serving similar households because, right, those jurisdictional boundaries have to come together at some point. So you have two cities trying to provide a similar service, but competing for that one funding source. And so what we realize is that what that does is it minimizes the impact, it minimizes the effectiveness. And so we thought, how can we actually create a system where cities aren't competing against each other? They're actually coming together to create something that federal governments, corporates, and foundations want to invest in. And so the idea here is the new model, as you see on the right, actually incentivizes corporates, foundations not to invest, not to choose which city to invest in, right? Not to choose Phoenix or to choose Tempe, right? No, instead choose the regional platform, invest in the platform and invest in the Digital Equity Institute, because then that Digital Equity Institute can scale that investment out across city A, city B, city C, etc. Right? It can scale the corporation's investment, the federal government's investment out across the entire region, thereby scaling the impact of that investment and really, especially for corporate funders, really providing you the maximum effect for your money and your investments. And so we really see this new model as again a way for cities to come together and provide a better way for corporations to invest in the community and create that positive impact that they're looking for. So what we really think we've done in federal agencies as well, what we really think we've done through this model is create that kind of win model through this collaboration. And so we're already realizing this benefits. We've just started kind of rolling out this model about 4 or 5 months ago, starting to connect some of the first communities. And as you can see here in some of these images, it was one of those, if we build it, they will come. We thought, okay, we're building this model. Let's see if it actually works. Let's see if it's successful. Will we get interest from corporations, from nonprofits, from schools? And the answer is yes. So as you can see, we've already started to partner with some very large corporations around this program, like Intel and Worldwide Technology, to really come together to help us solve this challenge, because we realize that again, collaboration is going to be the next competitive advantage for cities around the world that understand how to collaborate, that understand how to work with private sector partners. They're going to be the cities at the forefront of the next industrial revolution, where the cities that don't understand how to collaborate can't work together with other cities, can't work together with private sectors, aren't thinking regionally about how to deliver services. Those are the cities that are going to be left behind. And they're going to be part of this new kind of digital dust bowl, of the fourth industrial revolution. And so we don't want that. So we really want our cities to come together, work together, because when they do, the things we can do together are very impressive and very impactful. Because ultimately, what we want to do is build an equitable and inclusive region or state for everyone, because we want everyone to succeed. And so that's what we're calling the digital equity innovation as a service. And so maybe I'll pause here and just say thank you for this opportunity. What's exciting is that we're not bounded by jurisdictional boundaries, right? Even though that I'm sitting here at 4:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee talking to you, from Arizona, digital equity, digital inclusion is so important that we really need to find opportunities to come together, whether that's an Arizona project connecting with, South African project, coming together to try to see how we might be able to work together across our boundaries. That's what we need to do. And that's what I'm excited for. And that's kind of my role in my organization, is to go build those partnerships. So I'm looking forward to speaking with any of you who would like to contact me, reach out to see maybe how can we do a program together. How can we launch a chapter of the Digital Equity Institute in South Africa? Who knows where this partnership and this collaboration might take us. But I'm excited for the future in what it has in store for all of us. So thank you again. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen, take a sip of coffee. I'm Italian. I know I talk a little fast, so look forward to your questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dom, for that. That was really, really informative. I like how you really have managed to get all the well, not all, but most of the states around to work together. And we all know this is a tricky sort of topic to touch on, but how you've won in order for them to see the one vision, the oneness connected on connectivity and moving forward as a smart city. It does take a village. In South Africa, we say it takes a village to raise a child. And I guess, in the States, with regards to how successful you are in smart technologies, it does take more than one state
Yep.
because you all want the same thing inevitably. How is the transparency going between the states, though? How transparent can you be in terms of sharing knowledge and information, and how much do they actually keep and not share?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a big challenge, as I mentioned during the presentation, that cities just naturally struggled, governments naturally struggle to come together to share information, share data, share knowledge, share best practices. And so, what we've really tried to actively do is work to build structures to break down those barriers, break down those silos, build up those partnerships, and create an environment where trust, collaboration, information sharing is the norm. And so what we started out to do is slow process. What we started out doing was getting these governments to meet on a monthly basis, right? Putting them in the same room together, talking about digital equity, talking about the challenges they were facing. And what we saw over time is by meeting month after month after month after month, those relationships between the governments and the officials started to build, trust started to build, and they became a lot more comfortable sharing the information, sharing the data, and the transparency got a lot better. And so, unfortunately, it does just take a lot of time. Of course, there are still things that governments hold close to themselves, and they still aren't willing or able to share that we wish they would. But it's a process, and we understand it's not going to happen overnight. The main thing is understanding how can we put the system in place, the governance model in place to encourage it in the best way that we can. It's always going to be a work in progress, but it is exciting to see it. The mayors starting to come together where it used to be they would fight each other. Now they're coming together because, look, digital equity, it doesn't matter what party you are. It shouldn't matter. Connecting someone, making sure they have these skills, the devices, and the knowledge and support to succeed in this new world that we're living in remotely.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line. And that's what we found actually was able to kind of bring everyone together. Is this idea of, okay, everyone deserves this. Everyone needs this.
Mm,
How do we do this together?
that's stunning. We do have a question here. Are there any regulations related or linked to this program? And he says, I'm primarily asking in terms of South Africa.
Um, in regulations, I think you mean kind of like rules, laws. There's
Hmm.
nothing linked yet.
Hmm.
However, what we're doing, and maybe this is kind of where the question is taking me, what we're doing is again, it will become part of city charter, so government charter to
Hmm.
help kind of fund some of these services. So it will become kind of regulated in that sense as as I mentioned, the cities will actually help fund these programs that the Digital
Yeah.
Equity Institute will provide. So it will become part of their kind of budgets moving forward.
Okay. And then the next question is, what would be the minimum level of prerequisite infrastructure so we can assess where we are and plan to catch up?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wish I was the
Mm.
infrastructure expert on the team. However, what we know is we understand that for the connectivity piece, it's going to be a network of networks, right? We can't build broadband everywhere. We wish we could. It's just very expensive. So we understand that we've got to build broadband where we can, and then figure out other networks, whether it's wireless, cellular, to kind of go that last mile into the households. Now, where kind of my knowledge lies the most is kind of that governance infrastructure, the
Yeah.
organizational infrastructure. What you really need is kind of that independent organization. It could already exist in your community, right? It could be an economic development group. It could be, some other kind of a community anchor institution that can be that table that everyone can come to and help support and provide those services to your community or to your city. So what
Right.
we did is we looked towards what we called Greater Phoenix Economic Council. It was a regional economic development group. All the cities were already participating in that group. And so we went to them and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And we leveraged kind of the organizational structure and infrastructure of that group to then kind of start to really scale the program out. So I would say look for those community organizations, look at your
Mm,
community's ecosystem infrastructure and see how to best do this.
okay. And then our next question is, how do you overcome the tendency for politics to interfere?
It's a great question. They will always interfere.
Mm,
It's how do you best minimize it? Again, I
mm,
think what we really focused on, and I don't want this to sound bad, but we really focused this around economic development.
mm,
Every mayor, all the politicians, they want more jobs, they want more companies, they want more businesses in their communities. And what we've really focused on saying is that, look, these companies, they need workforce, they need people, right? They need educated
mm,
staff, and those companies are looking for that workforce. And we said digital equity, digital inclusion, it's hindering our workforce. If people
yeah.
can't learn right now online, if they can't work online, they're not going to be active in the workforce. And so we need to ensure that everyone's connected, everyone has these skills, and everyone is supported, or companies won't want to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona because
Mm,
there's not a workforce there for them to do so. And so we were able to kind of take that lens of a economic development perspective, and it's helped minimize the politics just a little bit, because they realize that, okay, it's economic development. It's going to help build jobs. It's going to help build, workforce.
mm.
It's hard to argue against that. And if they do, well, hopefully they're not in.
I agree. I agree. So raise the unemployment card, and suddenly everyone works together. Our
Exactly. I
next
mean, how,
question is,
oh, so yeah, I was just going to say, how can you say? I mean, when in the pandemic, when we sent all the students home,
yeah,
we saw kids with their back against the library wall trying to do homework on phones. I mean, no one wants
yeah,
that, right? That shouldn't
yeah,
happen. And so it's hard to argue against that.
that's so true. Question four is, how much sustainable energy do you deploy, considering that we have a lot of sunshine in Africa?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would love to get
Mm,
some of my energy experts to help you out. So please feel free to shoot me a note. But we
mm,
are, I don't know, for those that don't know Arizona, we are a desert, a lot of sunshine, and so we leverage solar energy tremendously. We have
good.
a lot of renewable energy through solar here, um, and so we leverage it to the utmost. And in fact, our two biggest utilities here, our energy utilities, have set ambitious goals to go carbon neutral and carbon free,
Mhm.
I think by 2030. So we heavily focus on solar energy here.
Mm, it's good. Question five, should we not start from our education system where we empower the next generation to maximize the opportunities for the fourth industrial revolution?
100%. And that's
Mm,
the entire kind of goal of this. As I just mentioned, those students not being able to participate when
mm,
schools shut down and all the classrooms went online.
yeah,
There was, I think, 30% of households in Arizona that were unconnected. That means these students just weren't going to class. They weren't
yeah,
participating in instructional learning. And so that starts to worry all of us is, what's happening to that next generation that's
Mm,
now unable to learn because they don't have access to the internet, or they don't have access to a laptop or the skills to participate in that classroom. So you're exactly right. We are trying to really focus and start on the educational system,
yeah.
but we have to make sure that everyone can participate in the educational system. And so that's what we're trying to do to ensure that these students can participate in that educational system.
Okay. And if we look at the picture in South Africa, when we shut down last year during the pandemic, literally those schools who couldn't have access to connectivity, who, were not in touch with the fourth industrial revolution, are the ones that struggled the most.
Right.
And when you look at your elites, in the country, their kids continued, as life as normal,
Exactly.
because of the connectivity issue, really. So you're right. We need to start with education. We need to, start getting our education ministers, up to date with regards to moving on with technology.
Yeah.
Dom,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. I've got one more question
Yeah.
from Shark Pina, and he asked if this process is not going to be dealt with under the competent guidance, which is the government in South Africa, it will most probably go nowhere. The government has to be willing to appoint the best competent people to be involved. In South Africa, this is quite a challenge.
Yeah. That, I mean, that's a great question and great statement. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, the government has to come to the table and has to do it for the right
Mm,
reasons. The best thing I can say there is, as I mentioned on the slide that was talking about the permanency of this organization, of this new model, we
mm,
purposely kind of spun it outside of the government, and it stands alone as an organization. It's funded by the government, but it's funded by corporates, it's funded by philanthropic
okay.
partners as well. So it actually sits outside of the government. So that way, it can drive this initiative for the
Yeah.
community on behalf of the government. So it was a difficult conversation to have because
Mm,
you're basically taking a service that the government normally would provide and
mm,
doing it through another organization. But again, the government's realized, I think, this point they couldn't do it. They were failing to do it, or
mm,
they weren't doing it effectively, efficiently. And so here's a new way to do it.
mm.
But that's a great point. I mean, hopefully, ultimately, we start to just get the right kind of people and the right kind of leaders in place to enable us to do this work, because we all know how important it is.
100%, Dom. I was going to add on to Shock to say, one of the issues we raised yesterday in the smart cities was the technical competency of government.
Oh yeah,
How did you guys get it right?
it's still a struggle. What we've done is we've worked to partner very closely with our universities
Mm,
and our industry partners, because you're right. I mean, some of our cities, there'll be a city engineer that's been there for 40 years, and they're
mm,
going, what is IoT? I don't even know what IoT is. And you're like, oh my goodness. Okay. So we really worked closely to, one, provide some upskilling programs, Smart Cities 101, to local government officials. But then we've also partnered really closely with our universities, so that
mm.
university researchers and professors can actually work alongside of our government and help them with the knowledge that
Ah,
they're lacking and the skills that they're lacking. So that, again, that partnerships with the university has been a very strong part of our initiative.
great stuff. Dom, I really need to thank you for your time and for waking up so early in the morning to present this workshop for us. Much appreciated. We
Yeah.
also want to thank our partner, Eaton, who have sponsored this workshop session and just ensured that, you know, our delegates get the right information regarding smart talks. So Dom, we'll see you soon. And thanks for all for participating and for your questions. And see you at the next session that starts at 2 o'clock. Bye, Dom.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.